This poor homeless kid makes an absurd proposal to a millionaire who has a sick son. He says, "I'll trade my life for your sons," and what happens next is shocking. Comment what you think will happen and subscribe to my channel to support my work. The hospital room was the most luxurious money could buy, but for Richard Thompson, those white, sterile walls had become a prison over the last 15 months. His tired eyes alternated between the laptop screen, where dozens of important emails awaited response, and the sleeping face of his son, Benny, connected to machines that monitored every beat of his fragile heart. At 42, Richard had achieved everything he'd ever dreamed of. He owned one of the largest real estate companies in the country, possessed considerable wealth, and more importantly, had a son who was his reason for living. But now, sitting in that Italian leather armchair that couldn't offer any real comfort, his entire empire seemed empty and meaningless. The rhythmic sound of the heart monitor was his constant background music, a distressing melody that marked the passage of time and Benny's fight for survival. At 11 years old, the boy who once overflowed with energy and curiosity now spent most of his time sleeping, his yellowish skin contrasting with the white hospital sheets. "Mr. Thompson," the soft voice of Nurse Carol interrupted his thoughts. "It's time for Benny's medication." Richard nodded, watching as she checked the various vials of medicine. He knew each one by name, knew its effects, times, and dosages. He had memorized everything in the irrational hope that this knowledge could somehow help his son. "How is he today?" he asked, although he already knew the answer. It was the same, as always, stable, but weak, desperately needing a transplant that seemed increasingly distant. "Maintaining vital signs, sir," Carol replied with that gentle smile that tried to convey hope, but couldn't completely hide the worry in her eyes. Benny stirred slightly in bed, his eyes opening with difficulty. "Dad?" he called in a weak voice. "I'm here, son." Richard stood up immediately, holding the boy's small, cold hand. "Do you need anything?" "Tell me a story," Benny asked, trying to form a smile that barely reached his eyes. "That one about the trip we were going to take." Richard swallowed hard, feeling his heart clench. The trip they had planned to celebrate Benny's 12th birthday, which would be in less than a month. An adventure through Europe that now seemed like a distant and impossible dream. "Of course, son." He forced a smile, stroking the boy's thinning hair. "Remember we were going to start in Paris? First, we were going to climb the Eiffel Tower." As he narrated the details of the trip that would never happen, Richard watched his son's face. Every feature, every expression was engraved in his memory. The shape of his eyes, identical to those of the mother who had abandoned them when Benny was only 2 years old. The small nose that wrinkled when he laughed. The stubborn chin, a paternal inheritance which was now even more pronounced due to his extreme thinness. His story was interrupted by a coughing fit from Benny. Carol quickly adjusted the position of the bed and checked the monitors, while Richard held his son's hand, feeling completely helpless. "Rest a little now," the nurse advised after the crisis passed. "You saved too much energy talking." Benny closed his eyes, exhausted by the simple effort of coughing. Richard remained by his side, stroking his hand until he was sure he had fallen asleep again. "Mr. Thompson," Carol called softly, "Dr. Evans would like to speak with you. He's in his office." Richard hesitated, looking at Benny. He didn't like leaving him alone, even for a few minutes. "I'll stay with him," Carol assured, understanding his concern. "Any changes, I'll call immediately." With one last look at his son, Richard left the room. The hospital corridor, with its Italian marble floor and artwork on the walls, resembled a luxury hotel more than a hospital. But for him, it was just the way to another conversation that probably wouldn't bring good news. Dr. Evans was waiting for him with a grave expression that Richard knew all too well. It was the same one he used when the tests showed that Benny's heart was getting worse, when another treatment attempt failed, when another potential donor proved incompatible. "Richard," the doctor gestured for him to sit down, "we need to discuss some options." "Options?" Richard almost laughed at the word. What options did they still have? They had tried everything: experimental drugs, alternative therapies, consultations with specialists from around the world. His son continued to die, and all his money was useless to prevent it. The latest tests. Dr. Evans hesitated, adjusting his glasses in a nervous gesture. "Cardiac function is declining faster than we anticipated. If we can't find a compatible donor in the next few weeks—" The sentence hung in the air, but its meaning was clear as crystal. Benny was running out of time. "How long?" Richard's voice came out hoarse, almost a whisper. "It's hard to say, but—" The doctor looked directly into his eyes. "Maybe a month, at most." A month. 30 days. Richard felt the world spin. His son wouldn't even turn 12. "There must be something we can do," he insisted, rising from the chair. "Some new treatment, some research." "Richard," Dr. Evans interrupted him gently, "you know we've tried everything within our reach. Benny's rare blood type, coupled with the specifics of his condition." "Then let's look beyond our reach." Richard slammed his hand on the table, making the doctor's coffee cup tremble. "I have enough money to buy an entire hospital. There must be a way." The silence that followed his outburst was broken only by the distant sound of an ambulance siren. Dr. Evans waited for him to calm down before speaking again. "There is a possibility," he said finally, "but it's risky, very risky." Richard sat down again, leaning forward. "What possibility?" "There's an experimental procedure." The doctor began to explain, but was interrupted by a sudden commotion in the corridor. "Dr. Evans!" Carol's alarmed voice echoed through the door. "It's Benny. He's having a crisis." The two men jumped up, running towards the room. The sound of the monitors in alarm grew with each step, along with the despair in Richard's heart. As he ran, a single question hammered in his mind. How much time did his son still have, and what was he willing to do to save him? Night fell over downtown Los Angeles when Cody settled into his usual spot, under the awning of the abandoned storefront on Hollywood Boulevard. The cardboard that served as his mattress was a little damp from the afternoon rain, but he had slept in worse conditions during his 2 years on the streets. At 13, he had learned to find comfort wherever possible. He counted the money he had earned that day. $23 from selling candy at intersections, plus $12 from recyclable materials he had collected in the morning. It wasn't much, but it would be enough to buy a sandwich at the deli and save some for emergencies. He divided some coins with his 3 street companions, as he always did. "You're a sucker, Cody," grumbled Mikey, the oldest of the group, taking his share. "You could keep it all for yourself." Cody shrugged, adjusting the worn-out hoodie he was wearing. "Can't eat saved money when you're hungry, right?" This philosophy of life had kept Cody alive and, in a way, whole since he ran away from the foster home. There he had learned the hard way that people can be cruel, especially to those who have no one to defend them. But he had also learned that kindness can arise in the most unlikely places, like Mrs. Johnson, the retired nurse who came twice a week distributing bandages and basic medicines to the homeless. She taught Cody basic first aid, because you never know when you'll need to help someone, she always said. The thought was interrupted by a loud screech of brakes, followed by the unmistakable sound of impact. Cody jumped up, his heart racing. The accident had happened at the nearby intersection, where 2 cars had collided. Without thinking twice, he ran towards the scene. One of the cars, an imposing black Mercedes, had its front end smashed in. The other vehicle had already fled. The scene, Inside the Mercedes, the driver was conscious but visibly dazed, a trickle of blood running from his forehead. "Sir, can you hear me?" Cody opened the car door, remembering Mrs. Johnson's teachings. Check if the victim is conscious, then check breathing and possible serious injuries. "Yes, yes," the man replied, trying to move. "Don't move," Cody ordered with an authority surprising for his age. "I need to see if you haven't hurt your neck." Carefully, he examined the man as he had learned. The cut on his forehead didn't seem deep, and he moved all his limbs without difficulty. There were no signs of serious injuries. "How do you know how to do that, kid?" asked the driver, impressed by the young man's competence. "I learned from a nurse," Cody replied, using his own hoodie to stop the bleeding from the man's forehead. "You need to go to the hospital for some tests, just to be sure." A small crowd was already forming around, some filming with cell phones, others just watching. No one else had approached to help. "What's your name?" asked the driver as Cody helped him out of the car. "Cody." "I'm Robert," the man introduced himself, leaning on the boy's shoulder. "I'm a private driver. I need to let my boss know." Robert tried to get his cell phone out of his pocket, but his hands were shaking too much. Cody grabbed it before it fell, handing it to the man. "Call the ambulance first," he suggested, "then tell your boss." While Robert made the calls, Cody remained by his side, monitoring his vital signs as Mrs. Johnson had taught him. The ambulance arrived in a few minutes, and the paramedics praised the first aid provided by the boy. "Wait!" Robert called as he was being placed in the ambulance. He took his wallet out of his pocket and held out some bills to Cody. "For what you did." Cody took a step back, shaking his head. "No need, sir. Helping is priceless." Robert watched the boy walk away, those words echoing in his mind. In his 30 years as a private driver, he had met hundreds of rich and influential people. But at that moment, he felt he had found someone truly noble, wearing a worn-out hoodie and living on the streets. Cody returned to his cardboard. The blood-stained hoodie would be another item to wash in the fountain in the park the next day. His companions were already asleep, used to his sudden departures to help strangers. He lay down, using the old backpack as a pillow. But sleep took a while to come. He thought about the man in the car, hoping he would be okay. He thought about Mrs. Johnson, who hadn't shown up for 2 weeks for her regular visits. He thought about how strange life was, putting such different people in his path. The next morning, he woke up with the first rays of sun. His day started early. He needed to get to the recycling depot before it got too crowded. He washed his face at the tap of a gas station, where the attendant already knew him and allowed him to use the bathroom. He was organizing his cart of materials when a black Mercedes, different from the one in the accident, stopped near the sidewalk. The driver's window rolled down, revealing Robert with a bandage on his forehead, but apparently well. "Cody," he called, smiling. "I'm glad I found you. I need to ask you a favor." The boy approached cautiously. The street had taught him to distrust offers and favors, especially from strangers in expensive cars. "My boss wants to meet you," Robert continued. "I told him how you helped me yesterday, and he was very impressed." "No need," Cody took a step back. "I already said I don't want money." "It's not about money," Robert assured, although he knew that, knowing his boss, it probably would be too. "It's about a job, something simple, but that can help a lot of people." Cody hesitated. A job would mean honest money, maybe even a better place to sleep. But it also meant trusting strangers, something he had promised himself never to do again after the foster home. "What kind of job?" "Come with me," Robert invited. "I promise that if you don't like what you hear, I'll bring you back. No obligation." Cody looked at his cart of recyclables, at the awning that was his makeshift home, at his companions who were still sleeping. What did he have to lose? In the worst case, he would return to his usual routine. "Okay," he decided finally. "But first I need to tell my friends. Robert watched the boy wake up the other kids and explain that he would be out for a few hours. The concern for his companions, even in his own precarious situation, said a lot about his character. When Cody got into the car, Robert noticed that he sat on the edge of the seat, ready to jump out if necessary. Distrust was his defense, but there was something more in his eyes, a curiosity, perhaps even a hope that he was trying to hide. "Where are we going?" Cody asked, watching the city pass by the window. "To Cedars-Sinai Medical Center," Robert replied, watching the boy's expression change in the rearview mirror. "My boss spends a lot of time there lately. His son is sick." The car drove towards the hospital, while Cody tried to imagine what kind of job there could be there for someone like him. He had no idea that he was about to enter a story that would change his life forever. Cedars-Sinai Medical Center inspired respect with its majestic structure, and Cody felt even smaller as he walked through the automatic glass doors. His worn sneakers left marks on the impeccable floor, provoking disapproving looks from the security guards. Robert, noticing the boy's discomfort, placed a hand on his shoulder, guiding him firmly through the corridors. "Robert," Nurse Carol intercepted them before that they reached the elevators. "How's your head? I was worried when I heard about the accident." "I'm fine now, thanks to this young man here," Robert replied, introducing Cody. "If it weren't for him," Carol observed. The boy with interest. Her years of experience had taught her to see beyond appearances, and there was something special in the way Cody held her gaze, a mixture of shyness and dignity. "Is Mr. Thompson in Benny's room?" Robert asked. Carol's expression changed subtly. "Yes, but maybe it's not a good time. Benny had a bad episode last night." Robert hesitated, but before he could answer, a deep voice echoed through the hallway. "Robert, is that you?" Richard Thompson approached with heavy steps, deep circles, marking his face. He didn't seem to have slept, still wearing the same clothes as the day before. "Mr. Thompson," Robert greeted. "This is Cody, the boy who helped me yesterday." Richard studied the boy for a few moments. There was something in Cody's posture, in the way he faced the scrutiny without shrinking, that caught his attention. "Carol told me about what you did," Richard said. "Where did you learn first aid?" "From Mrs. Johnson, a retired nurse," Cody replied. "She helps people who live on the streets." The raw honesty of the answer took Richard by surprise. There was no shame or self-pity in the boy's voice, just the statement of a fact. "How old are you?" 13. "And your parents?" Cody shrugged. "Never met them." A heavy silence followed the answer. Carol and Robert exchanged worried glances, but Richard seemed absorbed in his own thoughts. "Dad?" A weak voice called from inside the room. "Who's there?" Richard's face softened instantly. "I'll be right back, son." He turned to Cody. "Want to meet my son?" Cody nodded, following Richard into the room. The luxury of the environment impressed him less than the boy in the bed, so pale that he almost blended in with the sheets. Benny opened his eyes with effort, focusing on the unfamiliar visitor. "Hi," he murmured. "Hi," Cody replied, approaching cautiously. "I'm Cody. He helped Robert yesterday," Richard explained, adjusting Benny's pillows. "Saved his life." "Don't exaggerate," Cody protested, blushing slightly. "I just did what anyone would do." "But no one did," Benny observed, a small smile playing on his lips. "Only you." Something in the simplicity of that observation touched Cody deeply. Here was a boy who, despite having everything money could buy, was trapped in a hospital bed, fighting for his life. "Do you like to read?" Benny asked, pointing to a pile of books next to the bed. "I have a lot of cool stories here." "Actually," Cody hesitated, "I can't read very well. I only learned a little at the foster home before—" His voice faltered, painful memories threatening to surface, but Benny didn't seem to notice his discomfort. "I can teach you," he offered, his eyes sparkling with an animation he hadn't shown in a long time. "I have plenty of time here." Richard watched the interaction with growing interest. It had been weeks since he had seen his son so animated, so alive. "Cody," he called, making a sudden decision. "I have a proposition for you." The boy turned to him, instinctively taking a step back. Propositions, in his experience, rarely came without a price that was too high. "Benny spends a lot of time alone when I'm at the office," Richard continued. "I need someone to keep him company, organize his books, help with small tasks. It would be a paid job, of course." "Dad!" Benny sat up in bed, too excited, provoking. A coughing fit. Carol, who was watching from the door, approached quickly to check the monitors. "Easy there, young man. No overdoing it, remember." When the cough subsided, Benny looked pleadingly at Cody. "Please accept. It's boring being alone all day." Cody bit his lip, thoughtful. The money would be welcome, and something about Benny awakened his protective instinct. But there was also the fear, the distrust ingrained by years of disappointment. Can I think about it a little?" he asked finally. "Of course," Richard replied. "Robert can bring you back tomorrow if you decide to accept." Cody nodded, saying goodbye to Benny with a shy wave. As he followed Robert back to the car, his mind was racing. What had just happened? How had he gone from a street kid collecting recyclables to a possible companion for the son of a millionaire? "You don't have to decide now," Robert said, noticing his agitation, "but I think it would be good for both of you." Back on the street, Cody found his companions worried about his long absence. He told them about the proposal, seeking advice. "It's obviously a scam," Mikey opined. "Rich people don't help poor people for free." But something inside Cody disagreed. The look in Benny's eyes, Richard's genuine concern for his son, Carol's kindness, none of it seemed fake. That night, lying on his cardboard, Cody watched the stars through a gap between the buildings. He thought about Benny, alone in that hospital room, surrounded by luxury but lacking company. He thought about how strange life was, putting in his path someone who had everything he didn't, and yet needed his help. The decision formed in his heart before his mind even fully processed it. Tomorrow, when Robert came, he would accept the proposal. Not for the money, although that was important, but because something told him that this encounter hadn't been by chance. What Cody didn't know, as he fell asleep under the awning of the abandoned storefront, was that his decision would trigger a series of events that would change not only his life, but that of everyone around him. Fate, in its mysterious wisdom, had chosen an unlikely messenger for a lesson about love, sacrifice, and the true value of life. The days that followed established a new routine in Cody's life. Every morning, Robert picked him up at the same spot, always with a gentle smile and a fresh pastry from the bakery. The boy had refused Richard's offer to sleep in one of the hospital rooms, preferring to keep his space under the awning with his companions. Some battles against distrust needed to be won little by little. At the hospital, Cody discovered a completely new world. Carol taught him the importance of washing his hands properly and using hand sanitizer before entering Benny's room. Gradually, he learned the names of the medications, the times of the doses, the signs that indicated something wasn't right. But the most surprising thing was the transformation that his presence provoked in Benny. The sick boy, who had previously spent most of his time sleeping, now waited anxiously for Cody's arrival, his eyes gaining a special sparkle when his friend entered the room. "Today we're going to continue with the vowels," Benny announced on a particularly difficult morning when the pain prevented him from moving much. Even so, he insisted on giving his daily literacy lesson. Cody sat in the chair, next to the bed, watching as Benny, with trembling hands, drew the letters in a notebook. There was something deeply touching in the dedication of the sick boy to teach, as if each letter that Cody learned was a small victory against the fragility of his own condition. "You're a good teacher," Cody commented, proud to be able to identify all the vowels. "Better than the teacher at the foster home." Benny smiled, but the smile soon turned into a grimace of pain. Cody already knew what to do. He called Carol on the intercom and helped to better position the pillows, holding his friend's hand while the nurse administered the medication. "Tell me a story from the street," Benny asked when the pain began to subside. "A funny one." Cody thought for a moment before starting. "There was this one day when Mikey and I found a lost dog. It was a mutt, all dirty, but with a very expensive leather collar. The story, which involved a comical chase through downtown and ended with the dog being returned to an elegant lady who rewarded the boys with a snack at McDonald's, made Benny laugh so much that he needed to use his inhaler." "How do you do it?" Richard asked one afternoon, watching his son sleep peacefully after a morning of laughter with Cody. "Do what, sir?" "Make him forget that he's sick. Make him act like a normal kid." Cody reflected for a moment. "I think it's because I don't see him as sick. For me, he's just Benny, my friend who happens to be in a hospital." The simplicity of the answer hit Richard like a punch in the stomach. How many times had he gotten so lost in the role of worried father that he had forgotten to simply be a father? The days turned into weeks, and Cody became a constant and beloved presence at the hospital. The doctors noticed the improvement in Benny's mood, which contributed positively to his overall condition. The nurses were charmed by the kindness of the boy from the street, who always had a smile and a kind word for everyone. But not everything was happy moments. Benny's episodes became more frequent and severe. On a particularly scary afternoon, Cody was reading, still with some difficulty, a comic book when the heart monitor began to beep frantically. "Benny," he called, startled, seeing his friend turn very pale. "Carol, help." The next few minutes were a blur of frantic activity. Doctors and nurses stormed into the room, pushing Cody outside. He stood in the hallway trembling until Robert appeared and sat him down in a chair. "It's not your fault," the driver assured, noticing the boy's guilty look. "This happens sometimes." "But what if he—" Cody couldn't finish the sentence. Tears streaming down his face. It was the first time he had cried since leaving the foster home. On the street, he had learned to swallow his tears, to pretend to be strong. But now, the possibility of losing Benny broke through all his defenses. Richard arrived running, his expensive jacket disheveled, his cell phone still in his hand. Seeing Cody crying, he did something unexpected. He sat down next to him and hugged him. "He's strong," he murmured, more to himself than to the boy. "He'll get through this." And Benny got through it once again, but Dr. Evans was increasingly worried. In a private meeting with Richard, which Cody shouldn't have heard but did hear hidden behind the door, the doctor was direct. "His heart is failing faster than we anticipated. If we don't find a compatible donor soon—" Cody didn't wait to hear the rest. He ran to the nurse's station, where Carol was organizing medications. "How do I donate my heart to Benny?" he asked, breathless. Carol dropped the vials she was holding, shocked. "Cody, it doesn't work that way. Besides, donors need to be—" "But what if I'm compatible? Is there a way to know?" The nurse watched the boy for a long moment. There was so much determination in those eyes, so much unconditional love, that she felt her own heart clench. "I'll talk to Dr. Evans," she promised finally. "But Cody, don't get your hopes up. There are many factors involved in a transplant." That night, returning to his place under the awning, Cody did something he hadn't done in a long time. He prayed. He didn't know exactly to whom or for what, but he begged with all his heart that if there was any way to save his friend, that it would present itself. What he didn't know was that his prayer would be answered in a way that no one could have foreseen, and that the price of the answer would be much higher than anyone was prepared to pay. Lying on his cardboard, watching the lights of the passing cars, Cody thought about how his life had changed in recent weeks. Before, his days were dedicated only to survival. Now, for the first time, he felt that his existence had a greater purpose. In his room at the hospital, Benny was also awake, holding the storybook he was using to teach Cody to read. On the marked page, there was a sentence that his friend had managed to read alone that morning. Sometimes the greatest gifts come from the most unexpected places. Neither of the two boys could imagine how much this simple sentence would prove true, nor how much their lives would still be intertwined by the invisible threads of fate. The next morning, Dr. Evans found an unusual request on his desk, a request for compatibility tests for donation. The name of the possible donor surprised him. Cody, with no last name registered. Age, 13 years. The doctor removed his glasses, running his hand over his tired face. In 30 years of practice, he had never encountered a situation like this. "Are you sure about this?" he asked Carol, who was waiting for his answer standing before his desk. "He's just a child." "He's the one who asked," the nurse replied. "And you know Cody. When he puts something in his head." Dr. Evans sighed deeply. Normally, he would reject the request immediately, but Benny's situation was critical, and something in his medical instinct impelled him to at least investigate the possibility. "Do the preliminary tests," he decided finally. "But don't mention anything to Mr. Thompson yet." The days that followed were tense. Cody continued his normal routine with Benny, who was having more and more difficulty staying awake for long periods. Reading lessons now lasted only a few minutes, interrupted by coughing fits and moments of exhaustion. "You're sad today," Benny observed one afternoon. Noticing his friend's unusual silence, Cody forced a smile. He couldn't tell him that he had taken the first exams that morning, that his blood was being analyzed in some hospital laboratory, that perhaps, just perhaps, there might be a chance to save his friend. "Just worried about Mikey," he lied. "He has a bad cough." Benny tried to sit up in bed, but the effort left him breathless. Cody quickly adjusted the pillows, a gesture that had become automatic. "Wish I could help," Benny murmured. "You know, sometimes I dream that I'm running in the street helping people like you do." The statement hit Cody like an arrow. There was his friend, trapped in a bed, dreaming of helping others, while he had a healthy heart beating in his chest. The injustice of the situation suffocated him. That night, while organizing Benny's books, Cody overheard a conversation in the hallway that he shouldn't have. Dr. Evans was speaking to Carol in a low voice, but the words came clearly through the ajar door. "The preliminary results are in," the doctor was saying. "The compatibility is surprising, almost perfect." "But—" Cody moved closer to the door, his heart pounding. "But what?" Carol asked. "We found something. In Cody's tests, a congenital heart anomaly, still asymptomatic, but—" "Oh my God," Carol's voice faltered. "How long?" "Without treatment, he probably won't make it to 25. With proper monitoring and medication, we can extend it significantly, but—" Cody backed away from the door, his mind spinning. There was something wrong with his heart. Was he going to die young? The doctor's words echoed in his head, but for some reason he didn't feel afraid. Instead, a strange sense of purpose washed over him. If he was going to die anyway, why not give his heart to someone who had a whole life ahead of him? Someone who could make a difference in the world, as Benny certainly would if he had the chance. His thoughts were interrupted by a low groan coming from the bed. Benny was having another pain episode. Cody ran to call for help, pushing the revelation about his own condition to the back of his mind. Later, when Richard arrived for his nightly visit, he found the two boys sleeping. Benny in the bed, connected to his machines, and Cody in the armchair next to him, holding a storybook open in his lap. "How are they?" he asked Carol, who was making her routine notes. "Benny had some pain episodes today," she replied, avoiding looking directly at Richard. How could she tell him about Cody, about the cruel irony of finding a compatible donor who was also doomed? And Cody, he seemed down today. Carol felt a lump in her throat. He's just tired. He's been very dedicated to Benny." Richard watched the two boys for a long moment. It was strange how fate worked. A few weeks ago, Cody was just another street kid, and now it was impossible to imagine their lives without him. "You know," Richard said, his voice low so as not to wake the boys, "since Cody arrived, sometimes I can see a future beyond this hospital room. I can imagine Benny recovered, the two of them growing up together, studying, traveling." Carol felt tears forming in her eyes. How to tell this father that the boy who had brought hope to his son was also marked by the same shadow of death? Outside the hospital, the Los Angeles night pulsed with its characteristic energy. Cars honked, people returned home after a long day of work. Life went on as normal. But inside that room, time seemed suspended, as if the whole universe held its breath, awaiting the next chapter of this story that fate was writing with inks of love and sacrifice. Cody stirred in the armchair, murmuring something in his sleep. Maybe he dreamed of a different future, where hearts didn't fail and children didn't have to choose between their own lives and the lives of their friends. Or maybe he simply dreamed of the next day, with another reading lesson, another story to tell, another precious moment alongside his friend. Benny's heart monitor maintained its constant rhythm, marking time with its regular beeps. It was a song that Cody had learned to interpret. When it was strong and regular, it meant a good day. When irregular and weak, it announced the crises they feared so much. On the nursing station table, the results of Cody's tests awaited Dr. Evans's decision. Fate had created a situation of cruel irony. The only person compatible to save Benny was someone who also needed to be saved. But who would save Cody? And more importantly, who would have the right to decide which life was worth more? The ethical dilemma that tormented Dr. Evans didn't let him sleep that night. At his home, sitting in his private office with a cold cup of coffee forgotten on the table, he repeatedly reviewed the test results. The compatibility between Cody and Benny was extraordinary, almost a medical miracle. Under normal conditions, it would be the answer everyone was waiting for. But the conditions were far from normal. Cody's heart condition, although not yet showing symptoms, was a silent sentence. The doctor had seen similar cases throughout his career. Some patients lived until their early 20s without major complications. Others succumbed even in adolescence. With proper treatment, constant monitoring and medication, Cody could have a considerable lifespan. But on the streets, without resources or medical follow-up, the sound of the doorbell startled him from his thoughts. Who could it be at this time of night? Upon opening the door, he found Carol, still in her hospital uniform. "Sorry to come without warning," she said, her hands trembling slightly, "but I couldn't sleep. I needed to talk about Cody." Dr. Evans led her to his office, offering a cup of the coffee that he himself had barely touched. Carol sat down, her red eyes betraying that she also hadn't slept. "What are we going to do?" she asked directly. "We can't just ignore his condition. We also can't ignore that he's Benny's only real chance," the doctor replied, massaging his temples. "And you saw the latest tests. Benny won't last much longer." "But what if we could treat both of them?" Carol suggested, leaning forward. "Mr. Thompson has resources, and he clearly cares about Cody. And how would we explain that we discovered his condition, that we did tests without authorization from any legal guardian?" The silence that followed was heavy. Outside, the rain began to fall, as if the sky shared the anguish of that conversation. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Richard watched his son sleep. The words of the latest medical report echoed in his mind. Accelerated deterioration of cardiac function. Estimated survival time without transplant. Weeks. How does a father process information like that? His eyes landed on Cody, who had insisted on staying at the hospital that night, claiming that Benny was more agitated than normal. The boy slept curled up in the armchair, his old hoodie serving as a blanket. In a few weeks, that street kid had become an indispensable part of their lives. A subtle movement caught his attention. Cody was dreaming, his lips murmuring inaudible words. Suddenly, the boy woke up startled, looking around with frightened eyes. "It's okay," Richard reassured him. "It was just a dream." Cody took a deep breath, trying to calm down. "Sorry, I dreamed I was in a dark room and my heart, it stopped beating, but I could see it beating in Benny's chest." Richard felt a chill run down his spine. There was something prophetic about that dream that disturbed him deeply. "Cody," he called softly, "have you ever thought about living here at the hospital? There are empty rooms on the companion floor and—" "I can't abandon my friends," Cody interrupted. "Mikey's sick. I need to take care of him." "We can help. Your friends, too. Find a place for them." Cody shook his head. "They wouldn't accept it. On the street, you learn not to trust help that seems too good to be true." The wisdom of those words, coming from someone so young, made Richard reflect on how many disappointments that boy must have faced in his short life. At the nursing station, Robert was talking to one of the night shift nurses. Since the accident, he had been spending more and more time at the hospital, as if he felt he needed to be around. "Cody saved me that day," he commented, watching the movement of the hallway. "But sometimes I wonder if it wasn't the other way around. If we weren't saved by him." The nurse smiled, understanding perfectly what he meant. Everyone who lived with Cody realized that there was something special about that boy, a unique ability to touch lives and transform them. The next morning, Dr. Evans arrived at the hospital earlier than usual. The sleepless night had led him to a decision. He would talk to Richard. He couldn't carry the weight of that information alone. He found the businessman in the hospital garden, a space rarely used at that time of morning. Richard was sitting on a bench, watching the sunrise with distant eyes. "Mr. Thompson," the doctor called, "we need to talk about something important." "About Cody?" Richard turned to him, immediately noticing the seriousness in his voice. "Did something happen?" "Actually, yes. But it's a complicated story, and you need to be prepared for what I'm going to tell you." Meanwhile, in Benny's room, Cody organized the books they would use that morning. He had learned more letters in the past week and could hardly wait to show his progress to his friend. "Cody," Benny called, his voice weaker than usual. "Yeah? If I die—" "Don't say that," Cody interrupted, dropping the books he was holding. "Let me finish," Benny insisted. "If I die, promise. You'll keep studying? That you'll learn to read all the stories in the world?" Cody felt tears burning his eyes. "You're not going to die. I won't let you." What he didn't know was that, at that very moment, in the hospital garden, his destiny was being discussed. Dr. Evans revealed to Richard not only the compatibility between the boys, but also the cruel irony that fate had prepared. The morning advanced over downtown Los Angeles, the sun slowly warming the busy streets. Somewhere in the city, Mikey and the other street kids woke up in their makeshift shelter, missing Cody's constant presence. At the hospital, nurses changed shifts. Doctors made their rounds, and two boys shared dreams and promises, oblivious to the decisions that would change their lives forever. The hospital garden was silent when Dr. Evans finished his explanation. Richard remained motionless, his face a mask of shock and disbelief. The doctor's words echoed in his mind like a nightmare from which he couldn't wake up. Are you telling me, he spoke finally, his voice hoarse, that we found a compatible donor for my son, but that this donor is also dying? Cody's condition is different, Dr. Evans explained for the third time, as if repeating the facts could make them less cruel. It's progressive, still asymptomatic. With proper treatment, he could have several years of relatively normal life. But without treatment in the conditions he lives. The doctor left the sentence incomplete, but its meaning was clear. Richard rose abruptly, beginning to pace back and forth. His hands were shaking, and he shoved them into the pockets of the expensive jacket that now seemed to suffocate him. Why did you do these tests on him? Who authorized them? He's the one who asked, Dr. Evans replied. Cody came to Carol, wanting to know how he could donate his heart to Benny. The revelation hit Richard like a punch in the stomach. That boy, who had already lost so much in life, was willing to give literally everything to save his son. The irony of fate was almost unbearable. In Benny's room, oblivious to the storm that was brewing, Cody continued his reading lesson. He had managed to put several letters together on his own, forming small words that made his friend's eyes sparkle with pride. Far, I-E-N-D, he spelled slowly, his finger following the letters in the book. Friend. Perfect, Benny exclaimed, although the enthusiasm was soon followed by a coughing fit. Carol, who was watching the scene from the door, felt her heart clench. How could life be so unfair? How could it present a solution that was, at the same time, a sentence? Everything. Okay, Cody asked, helping Benny drink some water. Just tired, the boy replied, his eyes already starting to close. But I want to finish the lesson. We'll continue tomorrow, Cody promised, adjusting the pillows. Now rest a little. While Benny fell asleep, Cody organized the books on the shelf, a task that had become a comforting ritual. His fingers stopped on a volume in particular, a book about the human body that Benny used to explain why his heart was sick. The heart is like a pump, his friend had said, pointing to the colorful illustrations. Mine just doesn't pump right. Cody opened the book, his newly literate eyes struggling to decipher the more complex words. There was a picture of the heart, with its chambers and valves, its arteries and veins. It seemed so simple there on paper, so replaceable. In the garden, the conversation between Richard and Dr. Evans continued, now in lower tones, as if the weight of the decisions they needed to make required reverence. What are the real options? Richard asked, running his hand through his graying hair. If we decided not to tell Cody about his condition, it would be unethical, Dr. Evans interrupted firmly, and illegal. He has the right to know, to receive treatment. And if I committed to taking care of him, to paying for all the necessary treatment, even so, we would need a legal guardian to authorize any procedure. And there's the matter of time. Benny is getting worse quickly, while Cody's condition is still in its early stages. The sound of hurried footsteps interrupted the conversation. It was Robert, his normally calm face marked by concern. Mr. Thompson, he called, approaching. It's Benny. He's having another episode. The three men ran back to the hospital. In the room, they found a scene that had become sadly familiar. Benny, struggling to breathe, surrounded by doctors and nurses, while the monitors emitted their insistent alerts. Cody was in a corner, his hands clutching the book about the human, body against his chest, his eyes fixed on the friend who was struggling in the bed. It was at this moment that something inside him broke, or maybe it strengthened. Dr. Evans, he called, his voice surprisingly firm. I need to talk to you about the tests that Carol ordered. The doctor exchanged a quick glance with Richard, who had frozen upon hearing the boy's words. Cody, Carol began, trying to intervene. Now is not the time. Yes, it is, he insisted. It's exactly the time, because I know I'm compatible with Benny. I heard you talking the other day. The silence that followed was broken only by the beeps of the monitors, now more stable after the medical team's intervention. Benny had been sedated and was sleeping, soundly, oblivious to the drama unfolding around him. "And I also know," Cody continued, his voice dropping to almost a whisper, "that there's something wrong with my heart. That I'm also going to—" He swallowed hard, unable to complete the sentence. Richard took a step toward him, but Cody raised his hand, asking for silence. "Please let me finish. I've thought a lot about this. If I'm going to die anyway, at least I want my life to be worth something. I want to save Benny." Tears ran freely down Carol's face. Robert had leaned against the wall, as if his legs could no longer support him. Dr. Evans stared at his shoes, unable to face the nobility and despair of that child. It was Richard who finally broke the silence, his voice choked with emotion. "No, Cody, I'm not going to let you sacrifice yourself. There has to be another way." "But there isn't," the boy exclaimed, dropping the book to the floor. "And you know it. How much time does Benny have left? Days? Weeks?" The accuracy of that analysis, coming from someone so young, was devastating. Cody had learned to read not only the words in books, but also the signs, the worried looks, the whispers, in the hallways. "I have no one," he continued, his voice now softer. "No family, no future. But Benny, he can do so much. He's smart, kind. He can help so many people." "You are all those things too," Richard interrupted, reaching out to hold the boy's shoulders. "And you do have a family. You have us." Cody looked at that man who, in a few weeks, had become more of a father to him than anyone else in his life. Then at Carol, who treated him with the affection of a mother. At Robert, who always brought an extra pastry for breakfast, just in case you're hungrier today. And finally his gaze landed on Benny, asleep in the bed, his breathing still irregular. Even after the medication, his first and best friend, the first person who had treated him not as a street kid, but as an equal. "Please," he whispered, the tears finally overcoming his resistance. "Let me do this. Let me save him." The request, so simple and so impossible, hung in the air like a prayer. Outside the hospital, the city continued its frenetic pace, oblivious to the drama unfolding in that room. Cars honked, people rushed to their appointments. Life went on as normal. But inside those walls, time seemed to have stopped, suspended, between one heartbeat and another, between an impossible decision and its inevitable consequences. And at the center of it all, a boy who had learned too late the meaning of the word friend, only to discover that sometimes loving means being willing to give much more than you ever thought possible. Night fell over the hospital like a heavy blanket. Richard was in his private office in the building, a space he rarely used since Benny had gotten sick. On his desk, 2 medical charts told parallel stories of failing hearts, one rapidly, the other on a slower but equally fatal countdown. The coffee in his cup had gone cold hours ago, untouched like the dozens of important emails that blinked on his computer. How to make decisions about business when the lives of 2 children weighed on his shoulders. A soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Carol, still in her uniform, although her shift had ended long ago. "Sorry to bother you, Mr. Thompson, but I thought you should know. Cody didn't go back to the street today." Richard raised his head sharply. "Where is he?" "In the hospital chapel. He's been there for hours, alone." The chapel was a small and simple place, lit only by a few candles. Richard found Cody sitting in the last pew, his eyes fixed on an image of St. Francis of Assisi. "Can I sit down?" he asked softly. Cody nodded without taking his eyes off the image. His face showed signs that he had been crying, but now it was serene, almost resigned. "You know," the boy began after a long silence, "when I ran away from The foster home, I promised myself I'd never pray again. I thought God had abandoned me just like everyone else. Richard said nothing, just listened. But today I'm asking. Not for me, but for Benny. Cody finally turned to face him. Why won't you let me help him? The question, so direct and at the same time so complex, made Richard feel like something was crushing his chest. Because you're important too, Cody. Your life has value. What value? The boy retorted with a bitterness that didn't match his age. I'm going to die anyway, aren't I? At least this way. This way what? This way I'd be worth something. I'd be remembered for something good, not just as another street kid that nobody cares about. Richard felt tears burning his eyes. How to explain to this boy that he had already made more of a difference in their lives in a few weeks than many people in years? Cody, listen to me, he pleaded, turning in the pew to face the boy directly. You're not just another street kid. You're special. You're smart, brave, you have a huge heart. A sick heart, Cody interrupted with a sad smile. A heart that can still be treated, Richard insisted. Dr. Evans said that with the right treatment, you can live many years. You can study, fulfill your dreams. And Benny? How much time does he have? The question hit Richard like a punch. How to answer when the truth was so cruel? In the hospital room, Benny had woken up briefly. Still drowsy from the medication, he asked for Cody. He had to take care of some things, Robert explained, who was keeping the boy company. But he'll be back soon. He's sad, Benny murmured. I know he is, but I don't know why. Robert adjusted the pillows, trying to hide his own emotion. How had these two children connected so deeply in so little time? In the chapel, Richard was trying to find the right words. Cody, what if I told you that there is a possibility, a chance to save both of you? The boy frowned. What do you mean? Dr. Evans told me about an experimental procedure. It's risky, but... No. Cody interrupted, rising. Abruptly. I don't want to know about other treatments. I've seen how that works. They try one thing. It doesn't work. They try another. And meanwhile, Benny gets weaker. But this one is different, Richard insisted, also getting up. It's a new technique, developed by specialists. And how long until you know if it's going to work? Days? Weeks? Cody was almost shouting now, his voice echoing in the empty chapel. Benny doesn't have that time. The silence that followed was interrupted only by the distant sound of an ambulance siren. Outside, the city continued its nightly routine, indifferent to the drama unfolding within those sacred walls. You know what's worse? Cody continued, his voice now just a whisper. It's knowing that I can save him, that I have the solution. Right here, he tapped his own chest, but nobody lets me use it. It's not that simple. Yes, it is. It's the simplest thing in the world. I give my heart to Benny, he lives, and you die, Richard completed, his voice failing. How do you think Benny would feel knowing that you died to save him? How do you think he would live with that? The question took Cody by surprise. In all his thoughts about sacrifice and salvation, he hadn't considered this aspect. He wouldn't need to know, he murmured, but his voice no longer had the same conviction. Of course he would know. Benny is smart, he'd find out eventually. And then the heart you gave to save him would become a weight that he would carry forever. The words hit Cody like a lightning bolt of understanding. The image of Benny, healthy but carrying the guilt for his death, was almost unbearable. At that moment, as if fate wanted to underscore the gravity of the situation, the hospital loudspeaker blared an urgent announcement. Dr. Evans, report immediately to room 507. Emergency. The two looked at each other in panic. 507 was Benny's room. Come with me, Richard said, holding out his hand to Cody. Together they ran through the hospital corridors, their steps echoing on the marble floor. Time seemed to drag on and fly simultaneously, each second an eternity, each minute passing too quickly. They arrived at the room to find a familiar and terrifying scene. Benny having another episode. Doctors and nurses working frantically around him, monitors beeping in a desperate chorus. Cody grabbed Richard's hand tightly, and the businessman realized that at that moment he wasn't just Benny's father. He was also, in some way, the father that Cody had never had. Dr. Evans emerged from the room, his face grave but composed. "We managed to stabilize him, but—" he hesitated, looking from Richard to Cody. "We need to make a decision. Now." The hospital's meeting room was silent, except for the soft hum of the air conditioning. Dr. Evans had gathered a small team. In addition to himself, there were 2 specialists in cardiac surgery, Carol, Richard, and surprisingly Cody. The boy had insisted on participating, and something in his determination convinced the adults to allow his presence. "The procedure we are proposing, Dr. Evans began, spreading images and documents on the table, is extremely experimental. It was developed at the Heart Institute and has had promising results in initial tests, but—" "What's the success rate?" Richard interrupted, his hands intertwined so tightly that his knuckles were white. One of the specialists, Dr. Smith, cleared his throat before answering. "In the cases documented so far, we've had a rate of approximately 30% complete success." 30%. Richard rose abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "That's not a chance. It's practically a death sentence." "Mr. Thompson," intervened the other specialist, Dr. Johnson, "you need to understand that we're dealing with a unique situation here. It's not just a common transplant. We're proposing a procedure that could save both boys." Cody, who until then had been observing in silence, leaned forward to get a better look at the diagram spread on the table. Even with his recent literacy, he couldn't understand most of the technical words, but the images showed something that looked like a complex machine connected to 2 hearts. "How does it work?" he asked, his voice small but firm. The doctors exchanged glances, surprised by the boy's technical interest. It was Dr. Evans who answered. "It's a 2-step procedure. First, we use a special device to strengthen Benny's heart, while simultaneously treating his heart condition. Then, with a series of minor surgeries, we begin treatment of your condition." "Cody." "And if it doesn't work?" Cody's question was direct, his eyes fixed on the doctor. "If it doesn't work." Dr. Evans hesitated, but the boy deserved the truth. "There's the risk of losing both of you." The silence that followed was heavy, as lead Carol, who was standing near the window, let out a stifled sob. "But there's also the risk of losing both of you if we do nothing," Dr. Evans continued. "Benny won't last much longer without intervention, and Cody's condition, although slower, is equally fatal without proper treatment." Richard ran his hands over his tired face. How to make a decision like this, how to choose between risking everything or losing everything for sure. "I want to try." Cody's voice cut through the silence like a knife. "Cody," Richard began, "you don't have to—" "Yes, I do," the boy interrupted, getting up. "Don't you understand? If I don't try, I'm going to blame myself for the rest of my life, which is going to be short anyway. At least this way we both have a chance." Dr. Smith leaned forward. "There's another factor we need to consider, time. If we're going to do this, it needs to be soon. Benny's condition is worsening rapidly, and each crisis weakens his heart more." "How much time do we have to decide?" Richard asked. "Ideally, we should start preparations today. The surgery could be performed in 48 hours. 2 days. 48 hours to make a decision that could mean life or death for 2 children. "There's something you need to know," Cody said suddenly, "about Benny." All eyes turned to him. "Last night, when he woke up a little, he made me promise something. He said that if something happened to him, I was supposed to take care of his dad." His voice faltered slightly. Said his dad would need someone to remind him to smile once in a while. Richard felt the tears he had been holding back for hours finally overflow. His son, his little warrior, worried about his father's well-being even in the face of death. "And you know what I promised him," Cody continued. "I promised him that he wouldn't need me to take care of you, because he was going to do it himself. I promised him we were going to find a way for him to get better." Carol approached, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Cody, are you sure, absolutely sure that you want to try?" "Yes," he replied, and there was a maturity in his eyes that made everyone in the room remember that some children are forced to grow up too fast, but with one condition. "What?" Dr. Evans asked. If it goes wrong, if we can only save one." He took a deep breath. "Save Benny." "No," Richard protested. "No way! I'm not going to choose between you two." "I'm not asking you to choose," Cody said with surprising calmness. "I'm saying my choice. It's my heart. It's my decision." The silence that followed was interrupted by the sound of the intercom. It was Robert, announcing that Benny had woken up and was asking for everyone. "Let's take a vote," Dr. Evans proposed. "Everyone involved needs to agree. We can't proceed with any doubts or regrets." One by one, everyone in the room cast their vote. The final decision, however, rested with Richard. As Benny's father, and albeit unofficially the only father figure in Cody's life, his weight was greater. Richard looked at the street boy, who had become so important in their lives, then at the photo of Benny on the table, a photo from happier times when his son could still smile without getting tired. "Let's try it," he said finally, "but with a condition of my own, too." "What?" Cody asked. "If this works, if you both survive—" Richard held the boy's hands. "I want you to let me be your father, too. Officially. Forever." Cody's eyes widened, shining with restrained tears. You want to adopt me?" "I do. In fact, I already started the process a few weeks ago. I was just waiting for the right moment to tell you." The hug that followed said more than any words could express. And so, in that sterile meeting room, between medical diagrams and frightening statistics, a promise of family was born, fortified not by blood, but by the love and courage of two boys who refused to give up on each other. This day, 48 hours leading up to the surgery passed like a feverish dream. Benny's room, once so silent and oppressive, transformed into the center of intense activity. Doctors came and went constantly, performing tests and more tests on both boys. Carol personally supervised every medication, every preparatory procedure, as if her meticulous care could somehow influence the final outcome. Cody had finally agreed to sleep at the hospital, in a room prepared especially for him next to Benny's. On the first night, however, he woke up several times, startled, his heart beating fast. On one of those occasions, he found Richard in the hallway, also unable to sleep. "Want some hot chocolate?" the businessman offered. "The cafeteria is closed, but I have my contacts." Sitting in the small kitchenette on the floor, father and potential son shared not only the chocolate, but also their deepest fears. "What if I'm not a good son?" Cody asked suddenly, his voice small in the quiet of the early morning. "I've never had a real family before." Richard felt his heart clench. "What if I'm not a good father? I've failed Benny so much already." "You haven't failed," Cody protested with surprising vigor. "You're here, every day fighting for him. That's what being a dad is." The wisdom of that child, forged on the streets and tempered by adversity, never ceased to amaze Richard. The next morning, while performing the last tests, Cody asked to visit his friends from the street one last time. Robert drove him to the familiar awning, where Mikey and the others awaited him, already informed of the situation by Carol, who maintained contact with them. "You're crazy," Mikey declared, but there was pride in his voice. "You've always been the bravest of us." The boys had pooled their savings to buy him a gift, a small notebook and a new pencil. "For you to keep learning to read," they explained. The farewell was quick. Cody was never good with goodbyes. Before leaving, however, he made Mikey promise that if something went wrong, he would accept the help that Richard had offered to all of them. Back at the hospital, he found a surprise. Mrs. Johnson, the retired nurse who had taught him first aid, was there. Carol had located her and told her the whole story. "My boy," the woman said, hugging him with tears in her eyes. "I always knew. You had a special heart. I just didn't imagine how much." The last hours before the surgery were the most difficult. Benny, although weak, was lucid enough to understand that something important was about to happen. "Why is everyone so nervous?" he asked when he was alone with Cody. "It's an important surgery," Cody replied, trying to sound casual while arranging. "The book's on the shelf for the 10th time, but everything will be okay. Promise you'll be here when I wake up?" The innocent question hit Cody like an arrow. How to promise something he wasn't sure he could fulfill. "I promise I'll do my best," he replied finally, "and I promise that no matter what happens, you'll always be my best friend." That night, the last before the surgery, something extraordinary happened. Cody, who couldn't sleep, heard sounds coming from Benny's room. Upon investigating, he found Richard sitting on the edge of his son's bed, telling stories about when Benny was a baby. "Can I listen too?" he asked timidly from the door. "Of course," Richard smiled, making space on the bed. "Come and learn the stories of your new family." For hours, the three shared memories and dreams. Benny told about all the places he wanted to visit when he got better. Cody talked about his desire to learn to read perfectly and perhaps, one day, become a teacher. Richard listened to everything with his heart overflowing with love and fear. At midnight, Carol entered to administer the last round of medications before the pre-surgical fasting. She found the three asleep on the hospital bed, Benny in the middle, Richard and Cody on each side, like guardians. She didn't have the courage to wake them immediately. Instead, she stood watching that improbable scene, a millionaire businessman, his sick son and a street kid united by love and the hope of a miracle. It was Robert who finally broke the magic moment, entering the room silently with Dr. Evans. "It's time," the doctor murmured with regret. The awakening was gentle, but charged with restrained emotion. It was time to separate the boys for the final preparations. "Cody," Benny called sleepily, holding his friend's hand, "I wanted to tell you something." "What?" "I learned a new word yesterday. Brother." His eyes, although tired, sparkled. "That's what you are to me now. My brother." Cody couldn't answer. His throat was too tight with restrained tears. He just squeezed Benny's hand, hoping that in that simple gesture he could convey all the love he felt. As he was led to his own preparation room, Cody looked back one last time. He saw Richard hugging Benny, Carol checking the equipment with trembling hands, Robert standing at the door like a silent guardian. "Dad!" he called, testing the new word on his tongue. Richard turned immediately. If I don't wake up," Cody took a deep breath, "take care of Benny. And don't forget that I chose this, that I wanted to be part of this family, even if it was just for this little while." Before Richard could answer, Dr. Evans appeared to take Cody away. It was time. The next 18 hours would be the longest of their lives. While being prepared for surgery, Cody thought about how strange life was. A few weeks ago, he was sleeping on the cold floor of an awning, dreaming of a piece of bread. Now he was about to undergo a surgery that could save or take his life, with a father, a brother, and an entire family rooting for him. For the first time in a long time, he no longer felt alone, and that feeling, he realized, was worth any risk. The surgical center at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center had never witnessed an operation like this. 2 rooms were prepared side by side, connected by a door that normally remained closed. In one of them, Benny was already being prepared, his small body seeming even smaller under the surgical sheets. In the other, Cody received the last instructions from Dr. Evans. "Remember what we talked about?" the doctor asked, adjusting the mask on the boy's face. "When you wake up?" "I'll be in a different room," Cody completed, "and I won't be able to see Benny for a few days." It was vital to keep the two separated during the most critical period of recovery. Any infection, any complication could be fatal to both. In the hallway, Richard paced back and forth, unable to stand still. Robert had brought coffee, but the cups went cold untouched. Carol, who should have gone home after her shift, remained seated on one of the benches, her hands intertwined in a silent prayer. "Mr. Thompson," called one of the surgical center nurses. "They're ready to start. Do you want to see them before?" Richard followed the nurse first to Benny. His son was drowsy due to the pre-anesthetic medication, but he still managed to open his eyes when he felt his father's kiss on his forehead. "Dad," he murmured, "take care of Cody too, okay?" "I will, son. I'll take care of both of you." In the next room, Cody was trying to hide his nervousness by fiddling with the edge of the sheet. "Hey, champ," Richard called softly. "Hi, Dad," Cody replied, and that simple word made Richard's eyes fill with tears. "You know what I admire most about you?" the businessman asked, holding the boy's hand. "Your courage, not just today, but from the first day. When you helped Robert without asking for anything in return." "It wasn't courage," Cody said. "It was just the right thing to do." "Exactly. You always know what's right, even when it's hard." Richard leaned down to kiss the boy's forehead. "And now it's my turn to do what's right. I'll be here when you wake up like a real father." Cody's eyes shone with restrained tears. "Promise you won't abandon me, even if—" "Don't even finish that sentence," Richard interrupted. "You're my son now, forever." Dr. Evans appeared at the door, signaling that it was time. The medical team was already positioned, 20 professionals, divided between the two rooms, ready to perform a procedure that would go down in medical history. "Dad," Cody called when Richard was already at the door. If something, tell Benny that he was the best friend anyone could have." Richard needed to lean against the doorframe. How was it possible that this boy, so young, demonstrated so much maturity in the face of his own possible death? In the hallway, the minutes dragged on like hours. Carol had managed to convince Richard to sit down, but he remained restless, checking the clock every few minutes. Robert made regular trips to the hospital chapel, lighting candles and praying not only for the boys, but also for the medical, a team. The first hour of surgery was dedicated to preparations. Dr. Evans commanded the team with military precision. Each movement, each procedure had to be perfectly synchronized between the two rooms. In the waiting room, Mrs. Johnson had arrived, bringing with her an old rosary that, according to her, had belonged to her grandmother and had special healing powers. Even Richard, normally skeptical of such things, clung to any possibility of help, be it earthly or divine. The second hour brought the first moment of real tension. Benny's vital signs fluctuated dangerously during the installation of the special device that would assist his heart. "Pressure dropping," announced one of the monitors. For a few terrifying minutes, the team worked frantically to stabilize the boy. In the next room, oblivious to the drama, Cody also underwent delicate procedures. In the third hour, it was Cody's turn to give the team a scare. His heart rate rose inexplicably, causing concern among the doctors. "It may be a reaction to surgical stress," Dr. Smith explained to his team. "Let's adjust the medication." In the hallway, every time the surgical center door opened, everyone held their breath. News came in small doses. "Stable for now. Proceeding. As planned, vital signs maintained." Carol had started a diary of the surgery, noting every piece of information, every small progress. It was her way of maintaining sanity, of transforming the agonizing wait into something productive. In the 5th hour, the first important milestone was reached. The special device was working perfectly in Benny's body. It was a crucial step for the success of the procedure. "It's like an auxiliary heart," Dr. Evans explained to his team. "Now we need to ensure that his body accepts the change." Well, in the next room, the team worked on the delicate process of preparing Cody's heart for the experimental treatment. Each vessel, each valve needed to be carefully manipulated. The 6th hour brought a moment of hope. The first results showed that Benny's body was responding positively to the device. In Cody's room, the doctors were able to accurately identify the area affected by his condition, but there was still a long way to go. The surgery was scheduled to last 18 hours, and they hadn't even reached the halfway point. The real test was yet to come. In the hallway, Richard felt as if he had aged years in just a few hours. His phone rang constantly. Problems at the company, urgent decisions, business that couldn't wait. But for the first time in his life as a businessman, none of that mattered. "You should try to rest a little," Robert suggested gently. Richard shook his head. "I can't. Every time I close my eyes, I see their faces. Cody calling me Dad for the first time. Benny asking me to take care of his brother." The word brother made everyone emotional. It was incredible how two children who shared no blood had become so deeply connected. The 7th hour of the surgery was just beginning, and fate still held many surprises for that unlikely family. United by the love and courage of two extraordinary boys, the 8th hour of surgery brought the first major challenge. The special device in Benny's heart began to show signs of rejection. The monitors triggered alerts in sequence, filling the surgical room with their warning sounds. "Temperature rising," announced one of the assistants. 101.3 degrees and increasing. Dr. Evans remained calm, even when the faces of his colleagues showed growing concern. "Increase the dose of immunosuppressants. Let's give the body time to adapt." In the next room, Cody went through his own critical moments. The delicate manipulation of his heart revealed that his condition was even more complex than the tests had shown. "Found another compromised area," murmured Dr. Smith, adjusting the surgical lights for better visualization. "This will complicate the procedure." In the hallway, the wait became increasingly agonizing. Carol had given up trying to convince Richard to rest. Instead, she sat next to him, offering the only thing she could at that moment, her silent and supportive presence. Robert continued his pilgrimages between the chapel and the surgical center hallway, carrying coffee that no one drank and words of comfort that seemed increasingly empty in the face of the magnitude of the situation. The 9th hour brought a moment of hope when Benny's vital signs began to stabilize. The fever gradually subsided, and the device seemed to be finally accepted by his body. "He's a warrior," Dr. Evans commented to his team, allowing himself a brief moment of optimism. "Like his brother." The word brother echoed through the surgical room, reminding everyone that they weren't just performing a complex medical procedure, they were fighting to save a family that was just beginning to form. The 10th hour was marked by an unexpected event. Mikey, Cody's street friend, appeared at the hospital accompanied by other boys. They carried a small sign made of cardboard where they had written in crooked letters, "Strength, Cody and Benny." The hospital security initially hesitated to let them in, but Carol intervened. The boys were taken to the waiting room, where they joined the group awaiting news. "He always took care of us," Mikey said to Richard, breaking the awkward silence. That had settled in. Even when he had nothing for himself, he shared what he could. Richard observed that group of street children, their worn clothes contrasting with the luxurious environment of the hospital. Each of them could have been Cody, children abandoned by society, but who still maintained their humanity and ability to care. The 11th hour brought another moment of tension. Cody's heart presented a severe arrhythmia during a particularly delicate procedure. "We need more blood here," called Dr. Smith, "and prepare the defibrillator, just in case." In the waiting room, Mrs. Johnson began another round of prayers, her rosary passing from hand to hand among those present. Even the street boys, who had probably never been in a church, joined the prayers. The 12th hour marked the midpoint of the surgery. Dr. Evans came out briefly to update the family on the progress. "Benny is responding well to the device now," he explained, removing his surgical mask. "But we still have a long way to go. As for Cody," he hesitated, choosing his words, "his condition is more complex than we imagined, but we're doing everything possible." Richard captured the nuance. In his words, "What aren't you telling me, doctor?" The doctor sighed heavily. "We found more compromised areas in his heart. The treatment will be more difficult and time-consuming than we initially predicted." "But it's still possible," Richard insisted. "We can still save both of them." "We're trying," Dr. Evans replied. "That's all I can promise now." Back in the surgical rooms, the teams continued their meticulous work. Each suture, each adjustment to Benny's device, each manipulation of Cody's heart was done with extreme care and precision. In the 13th hour, Carol noticed something different in Richard's behavior. The businessman, normally so controlled, began to cry silently. "You know what's hardest," he confessed when she approached. "It's knowing that no matter the outcome, I'm going to lose a son today. If it works, Benny and Cody will need to be separated during recovery. If it goes wrong..." His voice failed. "Don't think about that," Carol consoled. "Focus on the fact that they have the best medical team possible, and more importantly, they have each other and they have you." The 14th hour brought a surreal moment. During an especially delicate procedure on Cody's heart, the doctors noticed something extraordinary. "Look at this," called Dr. Smith, pointing to a specific area. "The heart tissue is regenerating in a way I've never seen before." It was as if the boy's heart, against all odds, was fighting to heal itself, as if that organ, which had remained strong despite years of deprivation on the streets, refused to give up now that it had finally found a family. In the next room, Benny also showed signs of his own strength. His vital signs, which had previously fluctuated dangerously, now maintained a more stable rhythm, as if the two brothers, even separated by walls and unconsciousness, were somehow connected in their fight for survival. The surgery was far from over, but something had changed in the atmosphere. A spark of hope, still faint, began to grow. It was as if the love of that improbable family, the dedication of the medical team, and the prayers of all who waited in the hallway were, in some way, influencing destiny. The 15th hour of the surgery brought with it a new challenge. The device in Benny's heart began to show fluctuations in its operation, requiring constant adjustments from the medical team. At the same time, in the next room, Cody's heart showed worrying signs of stress due to the long surgical exposure. "We need to speed up the process," Dr. Evans murmured, observing the monitors with growing concern. "We can't keep both of them under anesthesia for much longer." The team worked with renewed urgency, their hands moving with even greater precision, aware that every second was precious. Sweat trickled from under the surgical masks, but no one dared stop to wipe it away. In the hallway, the atmosphere had changed subtly. Fatigue began to take its toll on all who waited. Mikey and the other street boys had fallen asleep on the benches, their small bodies curled up uncomfortably. Carol alternated between anxious checks of the clock and murmured prayers. Richard remained awake, his eyes fixed on the surgical center doors. Robert had managed to convince him to eat a sandwich, but each bite felt like sand in his mouth. "You need to stay strong," the driver insisted. "The boys are going to need you a lot when they wake up." The word when, not if, did not go unnoticed by Richard. It was impressive how Robert, even amidst all that anguish, managed to maintain his unwavering faith. The 16th hour brought a moment of pure terror. The monitors in Cody's room began to emit alerts in sequence, indicating a sharp drop in his vital signs. "Blood pressure plummeting," announced one of the assistants. "He's going into shock," Dr. Smith completed, his hands moving quickly over the boy's body. "We need to stabilize him now." In the next room, oblivious to the drama unfolding, Benny's team faced their own challenges. The special heart device needed to be adjusted once again, a delicate process that allowed no room for error. It was at this critical moment that something extraordinary happened. As the team struggled to stabilize Cody, one of the monitors began to register an unusual pattern in his heartbeats. "Doctor," called one of the nurses, "look at this." Dr. Smith approached the monitor, his eyes widening behind his surgical glasses. Cody's heart, even under tremendous stress, was developing a new pattern of functioning, as if it were adapting, reconfiguring itself. "It's impossible," he murmured. "I've never seen anything like it." In the waiting room, oblivious to these developments, Richard was surprised by an unexpected visit. Mrs. Rodriguez, the woman who had taken care of the cleaning of his office for more than 20 years, had arrived after her work shift. "I came as soon as I found out," she said, sitting next to him. From her worn bag, she took out a small bundle. "I brought this for the boys. It was an old medal of St. Luke, the patron saint of doctors. It was my grandmother's," she explained. "Helped me when my son was sick. Now it's your boy's turn." Richard held the medal with trembling hands, touched by the simplicity and sincerity of the gesture. It was incredible how his sons, even amidst all this ordeal, continued to bring extraordinary people into his life. The 17th hour began with a rush in the surgical center. The device in Benny's heart needed to be repositioned, a procedure that was not planned in the original schedule. "We're going to have to improvise," Dr. Evans announced to his team. "We have no choice." It was at this moment that Dr. Smith, from the next room, made a surprising discovery. The new pattern of functioning that Cody's heart had developed was not just an anomaly, it was a positive adaptation. "It's as if his heart is healing itself in a way we've never documented before," he explained to his team. "We are witnessing something unique in medicine." In the hallway, Carol noticed a change in the movement of the nurses who entered and left the surgical center. There was a new energy in the air, a different urgency. "Something's happening," she murmured to Robert. Richard, who had begun to doze off exhausted in his chair, woke up immediately. "What? What's wrong?" Before anyone could answer, Dr. Evans emerged from the surgical center. His face was marked by the fatigue of 17 hours of surgery, but there was something more in his expression, something that no one could decipher. "Mr. Thompson," he called, removing his surgical mask, "I need you to come with me." Richard felt his legs weaken. This was it. The moment he feared most had arrived. Which of his sons? "Both," Dr. Evans said, as if reading his thoughts. "I need you to see something that's happening with both of them." The businessman followed the doctor to a small observation room between the two surgical rooms. Through the glass, he could see the two teams working, the monitors blinking, the small and still bodies of his sons. "Look at the monitors," Dr. Evans instructed, pointing to the screens. "Specifically at the heart patterns." Richard observed the graphs that showed the boys' heartbeats. Even to his layman's eyes, there was something remarkable happening. "There," he began, unable to complete the sentence. "Synchronized," Dr. Evans completed. "Somehow, even in separate rooms, even unconscious, their hearts have found a common rhythm. And more than that, they're strengthening each other. It was as if the universe was confirming what everyone already knew. Those two boys, united not by blood, but by something much deeper, were truly brothers, and together they were stronger than anyone could imagine. The 18th and final hour of the surgery was approaching its end. The phenomenon of synchronization between the boys' hearts had given the medical team a new perspective on the procedure, but it also brought with it an unexpected dilemma. "If we stop the surgery now," Dr. Smith explained to Dr. Evans in a low voice, "we can preserve this extraordinary connection that has formed. But we haven't completed all the repairs we planned on Cody's heart. And if we continue?" Dr. Evans asked, although he already suspected the answer. "We may lose this unique synchronization. It's a risk I don't know if we should take, considering how both are responding positively to it." The decision needed to be made quickly. The 18 hours scheduled for the surgery were almost over, and keeping the boys under anesthesia for longer posed additional risks. In the observation room, Richard watched the team's work with a mixture of fascination and terror. Each movement of the doctors, each adjustment of the equipment seemed to carry the weight of his son's destinies. "Mr. Thompson," Dr. Evans called, entering the room, "we need your decision." The doctor explained the situation. They could end the surgery now, taking advantage of the extraordinary synchronization between the boys, or continue with the original plan, performing all the planned procedures on Cody's heart. "What's your professional recommendation?" Richard asked, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. "Honestly, I've never seen anything like this in 30 years of medicine. This connection between them, it's something that goes beyond science. My gut tells me to trust it." Richard observed the monitors once more. The boys' heartbeats continued in perfect harmony, as if they were dancing a silent waltz that only they knew. "Let's trust them," he decided finally. "They've shown us so many times that they know what's best." With the decision made, the teams began the closing procedures. It was a delicate process that required as much precision as the surgery itself. Any mistake at this moment could compromise everything they had achieved. In the hallway, the news that the surgery was ending spread quickly. Carol woke up the street boys, who had slept huddled together on the uncomfortable benches. Robert went to the chapel one last time to light another candle. Mrs. Johnson squeezed her rosary with renewed strength. "Now comes the hardest part," Dr. Evans said to Richard. "We need to wake them up from the anesthesia. It's a delicate process, and we don't know how the synchronization will behave when they regain consciousness." The next few minutes were of extreme tension. First, they began to gradually reduce Benny's anesthesia. His monitors were watched closely for any sign of complication. "Pressure stable," announced one of the assistants. "Heart rate maintaining the synchronized pattern." In the next room, they began the same process with Cody. It was crucial that the awakening of the two be coordinated to maintain the harmony that their hearts had found. It was at this moment that something unexpected happened. Benny's monitors began to record an increase in his brain activity, even before he showed signs of waking up. "He's dreaming," observed one of the nurses, looking at the electroencephalogram. Almost simultaneously, Cody's monitors showed the same pattern of brain activity. It was as if, even unconscious, the boys were sharing the same dream. Richard, watching everything through the glass, felt a chill run down his spine. How many times had he doubted things he couldn't explain? How many times had he dismissed the inexplicable in favor of the logical, the scientific? But now, before his eyes, something truly extraordinary was happening. The first signs of awakening came from Benny. His fingers moved slightly, an almost imperceptible tremor. Seconds later, Cody presented the same movement. "Incredible," murmured Dr. Smith. "It's as if they're synchronized on all levels, not just cardiac." The medical teams maintained a tense silence, observing each small sign, each change on the monitors. It was a crucial moment. Awakening from anesthesia was always a delicate period, and with two patients so young and a surgery so complex, the risks were even greater. Slowly, very slowly, the boys' vital signs began to strengthen. Their hearts maintained that harmonious rhythm that had so impressed the doctors, as if they refused to lose the connection they had established. It was Benny who opened his eyes first, although only for a brief moment. His eyelids fluttered and closed again, but that small sign of life made Richard stifle a sob of relief. Seconds later, as if responding to a silent call, Cody also showed the first signs of consciousness. His fingers twitched, searching for something or someone. "They're going to be okay," Dr. Evans said, finally allowing himself a smile behind his surgical mask. "We still have a long way to go, but they're going to be okay." Richard rested his forehead on the cold glass of the observation room, letting tears run freely down his face. His sons, his two extraordinary boys, had survived. More than that, they had proven that there are connections that go beyond blood, beyond science, beyond human understanding itself. In the hallway, when the news finally arrived, the celebration was restrained but deeply emotional. Carol hugged Robert, crying openly. The street boys gave silent cheers, conscious of the hospital. The night had already turned into dawn, and a new day was beginning to dawn over Los Angeles. It was a different dawn for everyone involved in that extraordinary journey. A dawn that brought with it not only the promise of life for two boys, but the confirmation that love, in its purest and most unexpected forms, is capable of performing miracles. The days following the surgery were a roller coaster of emotions. As planned, the boys were kept in separate rooms during the most critical period of recovery. It was a necessary precaution, but one that proved more difficult than anyone had predicted. Cody, when he finally regained full consciousness, his first question was about Benny. Even sedated and confused, his concern for his brother remained unwavering. "Is he okay?" he asked in a hoarse voice, trying to get out of bed as soon as he opened his eyes. Carol, who was on duty at that moment, gently prevented him from moving. "He is, but you need to stay quiet. Doctor's orders." "I want to see him," Cody insisted, his eyes already welling up with tears. Soon," Carol promised, adjusting the IV. "As soon as you're both stronger." In the next room, Benny was going through the same anguish. When he woke up, a few hours after Cody, his reaction was virtually identical. "Where's Cody?" he asked, searching for his friend with frightened eyes. He's alive, right?" Richard, who alternated his time between the two rooms, felt his heart clench. How to explain to an 11-year-old boy the complexity of the situation? "He is, son," he assured, holding Benny's hand. "He's recovering, just like you. But you need to stay separated for a while, so there's no risk of infection." The days dragged on with a torturous slowness. Richard had practically moved into the hospital, sleeping on a makeshift couch between the two rooms to be always available when either of the boys needed him. Robert continued his routine of tireless support, now not only bringing coffee, but also organizing a visitation system with Cody's street friends. Mikey and the other boys came regularly, always clean and well-behaved, bringing drawings and handmade cards. "The people on the street are doing a fundraiser," Mikey said during a visit, "to buy some new books for Cody to keep learning to read." The news made Richard swallow hard. How could those children who barely had enough to eat demonstrate so much generosity? Carol, observing the recovery of the two boys closely, noticed something intriguing. Even separated, their sleep and wake patterns remained synchronized. When Benny had a restless night, Cody also showed restlessness. When one relaxed, the other also found peace. "It's as if they're still connected," she commented to Dr. Evans during a round. The doctor nodded, consulting the medical records. "The tests show that their hearts maintain a very similar pattern of functioning. It's something I've never seen in my entire career." A week after the surgery came the first big test. Benny developed a low fever, apparently a normal reaction to the recovery process. At the same instant, literally at the same minute, Cody also presented a temperature elevation. "It's not possible," murmured Dr. Smith, running between the two rooms to confirm the measurements. "They have no contact with each other. How can they be presenting the same symptoms?" The answer, of course, was beyond medical understanding. It was something that transcended science, something that spoke of connections deeper than mere physical ties. 10 days after the surgery, Richard received news that filled him with hope. The preliminary tests showed that the device in Benny's heart was working perfectly, and Cody's heart condition presented surprising signs of improvement. "It's almost as if their hearts are healing together," Dr. Evans explained. "If they continue to progress like this, we may soon allow a quick visit between them." The news spread quickly through the hospital. Carol immediately began preparations for the meeting, ensuring that everything was perfectly sterilized and safe. Robert brought new clothes for Cody, a gift he had been saving for a special occasion. "Can't meet your brother wearing a hospital." "A gown," he joked, helping the boy get dressed. On the eve of the scheduled meeting, however, something unexpected happened. During the early morning hours, the heart monitors of both boys began to show significant changes. "It's as if they're restless," Carol observed, studying the charts. "As if they feel that something important is going to happen." Richard, who was in Benny's room at that moment, noticed his son agitated in his sleep, murmuring incomprehensible words. In the next room, Cody presented the same behavior. "Dad?" Benny called, waking up suddenly. "I dreamed about Cody." "It's normal." "Son," Richard tried to reassure him, "you're looking forward to seeing him tomorrow." "No," the boy insisted, his eyes strangely lucid for someone who had just woken up. "In the dream, we were in the hospital garden. He showed me how our hearts were beating together, like a song." In the next room, Cody had also woken up. When Carol went to check on him, she found him sitting on the bed, looking out the window. "I had a dream," he said before she could ask anything. "Benny and I were in the garden, and our hearts... it was like they sang together." Carol felt a chill run down her spine. How was it possible that the two had had exactly the same dream? The early morning hours advanced slowly, charged with expectation. In their separate rooms, the two boys remained awake, as if fearing that sleeping could somehow delay the moment of reunion. Richard, sitting in the hallway between the two rooms, could hear the soft voices of his sons, each talking to his respective nurse, each expressing the same anxiety, the same hope. The day began to dawn in Los Angeles, promising a sunrise that would forever change the lives of that very special family. No one could predict, however, that fate still held one last surprise, a revelation that would give new meaning to everything they had experienced so far. The day of the reunion dawned with a special clarity in Los Angeles. The hospital garden had been carefully prepared for the moment. Carol personally supervised the cleaning and organization of the space, ensuring that everything was perfect for the boys. Dr. Evans performed a final battery of tests on both before authorizing the meeting. The results surprised him once again. The hearts of the two maintained that extraordinary synchronization, now even stronger than during the surgery. "It's as if they knew," he commented to Richard, as if they were preparing for this moment. The team decided that Benny would be taken to the garden first, in a carefully monitored wheelchair, his face, still pale from the long recovery, lit up when he saw the sun for the first time in weeks. "Dad!" he called, holding Richard's hand with surprising strength. "What if he doesn't come?" "Of course he's coming, son. Why wouldn't he? What if he doesn't want to be my brother anymore?" The question, so innocent and at the same time so profound, made Richard kneel next to the wheelchair. "Benny, Cody risked his own life for you. He's already your brother, no matter what happens." In Cody's room, a similar scene unfolded. The boy, nervous. Let Robert help him get dressed for the third time. "What if he's different?" he asked, adjusting his new shirt. "What if he doesn't recognize me?" Carol, who was organizing the portable monitoring equipment, smiled gently. "Cody, you went through something extraordinary together. Some connections are too strong to be broken." Finally, the moment arrived. With extreme care, Cody was also accommodated in a wheelchair. On the way to the garden, his heart, that heart that had fought so hard to keep beating, seemed to want to jump out of his chest. A few feet away, Benny waited anxiously, his fingers drumming on the arm of the wheelchair. Richard watched, moved, how his youngest son had grown during those weeks of trial. When the garden doors opened and Cody appeared, time seemed to stop. For a moment no one moved, no one breathed. It was as if the universe itself held its breath, awaiting that reunion. "Cody!" Benny's shout broke the silence. "Benny!" Cody replied, already trying to get out of the chair. "Easy, you two," Dr. Evans intervened, although his voice betrayed his own emotion. "Let's do this right." Carefully, the chairs were brought closer. When they were finally side by side, the boys hugged, ignoring the monitor wires, the warnings from the doctors, everything. "You're alive," Benny sobbed. "You too," Cody replied, crying openly. The heart monitors, which continued to record the boys' heartbeats, showed something extraordinary. Their hearts not only maintained the synchronization, but seemed stronger when together. "Look at this," Dr. Smith murmured to his colleagues, pointing to the data. "It's as if they strengthen each other." Richard watched the scene with tears in his eyes. His sons, so different in origin but so alike in spirit, finally reunited. Carol and Robert, standing side by side, also cried silently. "Dad!" Benny called, holding out his hand to Richard. "Come here!" When he approached, the boys pulled him into a joint hug. There, in that perfect moment, they were finally a complete family. But fate still held one last surprise. Dr. Evans, who was analyzing the latest tests, made a surprising discovery. He called Dr. Smith to confirm his suspicions, and together they performed a few more quick tests. "Mr. Thompson," he called finally, "we need to talk about something extraordinary." The tests revealed that Cody's heart condition, which everyone believed to be congenital like Benny's, had in fact a different origin. It was an adaptation that his heart had developed over the years, as if it were preparing for that specific moment. "It's as if his body knew," Dr. Evans explained, showing the results, as if, in some inexplicable way, he had developed exactly the type of condition that would make him compatible with Benny. "But that's impossible," Richard protested. "Scientifically, yes, absolutely impossible," the doctor agreed. "But it happened, and more than that, the connection that formed between them during the surgery not only saved their lives, but is effectively healing both of them." The boys, oblivious to this discovery, continued to talk animatedly in the garden, planning everything they would do when they were discharged, the reading lessons they would resume, the places they would visit together. Richard watched his sons, marveling at the miracle he had witnessed. Not only the medical miracle, which defied science and logic, but the greater miracle of love, a love so strong that it was capable of transforming a street boy and a sick boy into brothers, a solitary businessman into a father of two, a group of strangers into a family. "You know," Cody said, looking at his brother with a smile, "when I lived on the street, I always looked at the stars before sleeping. I asked them to send me a family. And they sent one," Benny completed, squeezing his brother's hand. "They sent much more than that," Richard interjected, hugging his two sons. "They sent a miracle." The morning sun bathed the hospital garden, illuminating that unlikely but perfectly matched family. Carol and Robert, observing the scene, exchanged emotional smiles. The doctors, still marveling at the discovery they had made, began to plan scientific articles that would try to explain the inexplicable. But some things, as everyone present knew well, don't need explanation. Love, in its purest and most unexpected forms, has the power to perform miracles that go beyond human understanding. And there, in that hospital garden, two hearts that beat in perfect harmony were the living proof of it. "Where are we going now?" Cody asked, looking at his father and his brother. "Home," Richard replied, smiling. "Finally, we're all going home. Damn." And so, under the blue Los Angeles sky, a new family began their journey together, their hearts beating to the same rhythm, their lives intertwined by a miracle that no one could explain, but that everyone could feel. Love, after all, doesn't need explanations. It simply is, exists, and transforms, as it transformed a street boy into a son and brother, a businessman into a father of two, and a hospital into the stage of the most extraordinary miracle that city had ever witnessed.